Okay, welcome everyone to, I guess this is episode number 49, I've been told, of the Officiating Tuesday Night Zoomcast. For those that aren't aware, my name is Matt Leaf. I'm the director of the Officiating Education Program for USA Hockey. And joining us tonight is our first panelist is Jack Nolan, who is a seminar coordinator for the Southeast District and a longtime volunteer seminar instructor, and also been very actively involved in our instructor training programs each spring for the last 10 to 12 years or so. And then hopefully, although he's having a little problems connecting tonight so far, but hopefully Dave LaBuda, our national referee in chief, will be able to join us here shortly as well. Just a quick reminder that if as we go along here, we'll do our standard poll questions to start out. We'll get into a real brief presentation with some things. And if you do have any questions, tonight is designed to be a Q&A. If you do have any rules questions, and we want to keep it specific to the rules tonight, feel free to use the Q&A function of the webinar here, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. And if we have a lot of questions and a lot of good ones tonight with some good discussion, even after the hour, if we get into a situation where we got to some questions that we're unable to get to, I will make sure that over the course of the next couple of days that we respond to everyone with those questions as well. So with that, welcome, and let's get started with our poll for this evening. Should be an interesting one. We'll give you plenty of time to go through the 5 questions and provide your best answer. And then once you have answered all, I guess there's 6 questions tonight. Once you've answered all 6 questions, you can press the submit button on the bottom, and we'll look at the results real quick, and we'll get started with tonight's program. So poll questions should be appearing now. Okay, looks like we're pretty much done here. So I'm going to end. And we're going to share the results and go through them real quick. Okay, question number 1. Now we're a few months into the season. How would you summarize the players' adjustment to the rule changes, 21 through 25 rule changes? Looks like about 10% the players are all in and they fully adjusted. The majority, 53%. Most teams have adjusted and the rules have little impact on the games. 34%, roughly a third. Still a number of teams that have not adjusted, and 3%, one person indicated that in their particular area that the teams just haven't quite figured it out yet. Interesting data. I think, we ran a similar type question back in August or September, when one of our first Zoomcasts of the year, when we did the rule changes. And I think that the confidence level of the players being able to adjust, the majority of them felt that Thanksgiving was going to be kind of sort of that magic date. And looks like about 2/3 here feel that we've at least made that progress right now. Question number 2, how would you summarize the consistency of officials applying the new rules? Again, interesting, and especially this is coming mostly from an officiating group. 25% or roughly a quarter have been very consistent. 55% mostly consistent, where a few games consistency becomes an issue. And 20%, 1/5 or 1 in 5 feel that there's still quite a bit of inconsistency amongst their partners and the officials that are working the games that they watch. In your opinion, what is the most difficult rules to apply and creates the most confusion during games? A little bit all over the map here, and not surprised at all that the competitive contact and the body checking, for all practical purposes, rules 604 and 640 are the 2 that really seem to cause the most confusion and the most difficulty. 10% on the abusive officials, and again 13% on the big 4, so to speak. But again, not a real big surprise that and that probably leads back to the question number 2 in regards to the inconsistency as well, is the application of 604 and 640. Okay, I put this question in here just to kind of sort of prove a point. A rule states any player commits this action shall be assessed a minor or major plus game misconduct penalty or a match penalty. So what are those penalty options based on the way that you read that rule? And as you can see, we have a group of 38 people that participated in this. I would say 38 people who are highly experienced in reading rules and trying to understand the rules and applying those rules. And yet we still have a split decision in terms of what's the proper penalty options here. The correct answer, and this goes to, this comes from actually Rule 634D, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But the correct answer here is actually the one with the 37%. It's a minor plus a game misconduct penalty, a major plus a game misconduct penalty, or a match penalty. And just to show, regardless of how we were to present that particular rule, okay, and whether we put a comma in there or whether we add an entire another sentence or whatever, the bottom line is that there's still going to be people that are going to read that particular thing and read the rules differently and have a different perception of what the correct answer is. So in this particular case, it's a minor plus a game misconduct, major plus a game misconduct, or a match penalty is what the spirit and the intent is. And we'll get into that a little bit more thoroughly in the presentation coming up. Question number 5, again, a hot topic is the abuse angle and behavior. Have you been involved in a game this season where the behavior of a coach or spectator negatively impacted the game? Yes. You're an official, a coach, player. Basically, 21% said they have not been participating in the game. Is that so far? And if the answer to number 6 or number 5 was yes, was it the coach that was misbehaving, or was it the spectators? And again, 63% to 37% in favor of the coach there. I did get a couple of comments already in the Q&A indicating that they wish they could have answered both, because in some of the games that they've been involved with, it was both the coach and the spectators that created the issues. So again, thank you very much for taking a minute or two to share that feedback with us. It is important to us, and it is something that we utilize and consider to be a valuable tool for what we do throughout the officiating program and throughout USA Hockey. Okay, getting into the presentation real quick, and I'm going to get Jack involved here. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, so we're going to start out here. And again, a real brief presentation, a couple things to get us started, and then we'll try to start tackling some of your questions along those lines. I guess the first thing is want to just start is why plane rules, and why do we have them in the first place? And there's probably 3 main reasons as to why they're incorporated: the fair play, the safety, and the competitive balance. You know, again, the purpose of, and this is something that the Rules Committee looks at all the time, but the purpose of the USA Hockey Playing Rules is to standardize competition, provide for the orderly administration of interstate contests, simplify the training of athletic officials, and provide a common denominator in recognizing records and evaluating competition throughout the country. So that's the primary reason why, and a big part of you know, why we have plain rules in the first place. And I know we always joke that, you know, well, if you know, you just sent players out there, they'd enforce the rules themselves and stuff like that. But I think in the course of time, we found out that hasn't necessarily always been true. So with that in mind, just a quick reminder of what the role of the official is, and that is to enforce the rules of the game to the best of their ability. And I want to emphasize, for those that have been regulars, you've heard this before, is that it's okay. It's perfectly fine for you to not agree with a particular rule. There are rules in the USA Hockey Rulebook, the NHL Rulebook, the IHF Rulebook, whatever, that I don't necessarily agree with. But as our role as officials, which is to enforce those rules, it is not okay to not choose or choose not to enforce the rule. We still have that obligation. So with that in mind, I want to get Jack involved here real quick and also welcome Dave to the group. But we're going to start out with a little bit of an easy one, Jack, is based on that role and based on where we fit in. What's your concept or what's your ideas and as to why rule knowledge is such a critical part of the success of any official that's out there?
Well, thank you, Matt. And it just really stands to reason that if we're there to enforce the rules, we're there to ensure that we have a safe environment for the players to play and a fair environment for the game, that we have to know the rules that we're enforcing. And it's not just the rules that we see every day, the common rules of offside or icing or holding, but some of the things that you don't normally see, because when they come up, we'll talk about a few of those later in this Zoomcast. You have to know what to do. The coaches, the players, they don't always know the rules. They're looking towards us to be able to tell them what should have been done, what the rule was, and what the penalties are going to be. We have to get them correct. If you assess an incorrect rule, somebody could get a suspension that they don't deserve, or they may not get a suspension that they do deserve. So you really have to make sure that you get things right out there. Also, when you have command of the rules, it shows that you have respect for the game. You're out there doing your best and doing your job. And that goes to helping convince coaches, players, even the spectators in the stands, that you know what you're doing out there, and they'll give you the respect that you deserve. But if you make a mistake and you keep making the same mistakes with the rules, you're not going to get that respect, and you're going to have a hard time managing the game going forward. So really, you have to take time to learn the rules, learn when to enforce them and how to enforce them during the game and before and after the game. So.
Okay, thanks, Jack. And to take this one step further, Dave, we'll get put you to work here with something a little bit more difficult, but we often hear the phrase in terms of the spirit of the intent of the rule. It's not just enough to know what the rule is, but also the spirit of the intent. Why is understanding the spirit of the intent so important, and how does that help the official in properly applying the rules?
Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and welcome to you and to Jack. And my apologies for the lateness. It was a technical problem, but I'm happy to be here. That's a really great question. And I'm going to repeat a little bit of what Jack said here, but it is very important to understand why a rule was written the way that it was, and also understand what was the objective of that rule. In many cases, it's a matter of safety and fairness to the game as well as to the participants. And by understanding the spirit and intent of the rule, an official can better apply any specific rule to a specific game situation. Hockey is a fast-moving game with many variables in any given situation. And sometimes more than one rule may apply to a situation, and the official has got to be able to decide what is the correct rule to enforce and make a decision that has to be made in fractions of a second. So having an understanding of the rules beyond just the words of the rule is the only way to really correctly apply an individual rule to a specific situation. And that's why we always encourage officials to ask questions either at their seminar, be it virtual or in person, so that they do understand what was the purpose of this rule and what was it trying to accomplish within the context of playing the game and keeping it safe and fair.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And we're gonna show you some examples here coming up a little bit in terms of why the spirit of the intent is such an important part. And again, based on how people in Tennessee, they read things differently. Okay, and they also see things differently. So the spirit of the intent and understanding that can play a huge role. And we'll give you a couple of examples of that. But before we get into that, I want to touch on the consistency part real quick. And Jack, a common complaint from coaches is that officials are not consistent. They simply want the officials to be consistent. That's what they're looking for, whether they're calling penalties or whether they're not calling penalties. As long as they're consistent, everyone seems to be happy. But how much of that is an easy cop out? As a result of the coach maybe not knowing the rules and or being emotionally attached to the outcome versus the officials actually being inconsistent in their application of certain rules?
Well, Matt, I think it's really a bit of a mixed bag, because certainly we can't deny that we have officials that struggle with their consistency. And some of them are all over the place, and some of them are extremely they do the consistency part really well. So we always are talking to them to make sure that they, again, rule knowledge is key. Make sure that they know when they're supposed to assess a rule, work with a rule, and under what circumstances they're supposed to be penalizing players. You also have to watch that if you're not watching yourself, even the best official can slip. It's like falling back into an old habit. So you just have to make sure that you're always thinking about it and making sure that you are consistently working in the rules. It is a two-way street. It's not the job of the coaches really to know the rules. They're out there trying to teach their players how to play. They're managing the bench during the games. They're doing all the off ice and everything else that has to do with the development of the players. And as we said before, they depend on us to know the rules and to apply them fairly and consistently. And yes, they do watch game. They are advocating for their team at all times. So you're always going to have a coach maybe say a few things to you that, you know, he's wrong. It is a penalty. It is a penalty. The other thing I'm going to say is most of the rules have nuances. You know, a player skating across the ice and tripping over a stick that was already there, just laying there or standing there in the defenseman's hands, is not a trip. But you'll get a coach calling it, and then he'll call and say the official is inconsistent because at the other end he called a trip, where that player actually stuck a stick out at the last second and tripped the player. So it is a little bit of both. It is something that we have to work on. It is something that we have to keep an eye on ourselves. And, you know, in many cases, we do have to keep, just keep an eye on what the coaches say and whether they're actually making sense with their claims or not making their sense. But.
Yeah, Jack, that you made a great point there too. And just another example is even the sight line makes a difference sometimes in terms of how that particular action is perceived. And this is another topic for another Zoom cast in regards to why positioning is so important and creating that sight line. But the coach standing on the bench 65 feet away versus the sight line that the official may have from 15 feet away on that same side of the ice are two totally different things. And we could certainly show some video examples of the exact same plays shown from different camera angles and have a completely different perception of what just happened.
Absolutely. A coach may not see a hand come off the stick and grab somebody down around the hip and turn them when you're standing right there in the right position. You see it. You may be the only one in the whole building that sees it, but it's penalty.
Yep.
You have to call it.
Yep. Very good. And Dave, staying on the consistency thing, if part of the responsibility is on the official, do you have some advice on how officials can help themselves in becoming more consistent in their rule application?
Well, it's interesting that this comes up right at this moment, since I think I just saw a Q&A question to that effect. Consistency basically consists of three components: rules knowledge, judgment, and hockey common sense. Knowledge, of course, is knowing and understanding how the rules were meant to be applied, which goes back to what we talked about earlier about spirit and intent. Judgment is deciding when an action by a player violates a rule. And then hockey common sense is knowing when is the right time to penalize a rules infraction to keep the game safe and fair. Now, all three of these factors are developed over time through game experience, mentoring, and self-evaluation. Really, the two that are most available to most officials is, of course, game experience, which is actually going out and working the game with your partner or partners and learning from them, but also self-evaluation. Officiating, particularly ice hockey officiating, there needs to be a lot of self-evaluation done. And of course, that then requires a good understanding of not only the rule book, but also the case book, as well as the manuals with regards to mechanics and positioning and so on. So again, rules knowledge, judgment, and hockey common sense. If you can get all those three things into your thought process, that will also help with the consistency issue.
Yep. Thanks, Dave. And I think the other part of this too is just try to keep things simple from the rule knowledge standpoint. And you have lots of resources available to you, whether it be videos, video clips that are on usahockey.com or part of the seminar, the rule book, the case book themselves. But I think also some of the manuals where it talks about the penalty criteria, the 4 penalty criteria, and trying to get away from minimizing or making that gray area smaller, and just recognizing the fact that if a violation of the rules occur and it fits into one of those 4 penalty criteria, that the chances are probably pretty good that it's a penalty. And if we can simplify that, I think that'll help us too. So as promised, we got a couple of examples, or 4 examples here of some rules that have given officials a hard time on the exams over the years. And it doesn't matter how we have worded the questions. They've been worded differently. They've been different levels of the various exams and stuff like that. But yet each year, these particular questions or these particular rules tend to give officials problems. And want to just take a second here to go through those 4 and give you a little bit of more background in terms of the spirit of the intent of that rule to maybe give a little bit of a better understanding. The beauty of this one is we actually, I think the rule changes and the updating we did to rules 204 and 205 have actually helped officials understand and coaches and everyone understand this a little bit better. But it deals with when a goalkeeper has been substituted for, when can that goalkeeper return to the ice? And I think if you understand the reason why the rule is the way that it is to prevent a coach and or a team taking advantage of a goalkeeper change during a stoppage for the purpose of delaying the game a little bit and not having to call a timeout. So if a goalkeeper is changed during play, their spirit of the intent there is not necessarily to hold up the game or to delay the game at that point. So anytime a goalkeeper is substituted for during play, they are allowed to be substituted again or go back into the game at any time once play resumes. Okay. For a goalkeeper that was substituted for a player during a stoppage of play, so they put an extra attacker on because they're down by a goal, or they have a power play with 5 minutes left in the game and they're down by 2 goals or something. That goalkeeper can return once again for that player or any player once play resumes again. They do not have to wait until the next stoppage. However, if a goalkeeper is substituted for another goalkeeper at a stoppage, in that case, the original goalkeeper has to wait till the next stoppage of play. And the reason is we want to discourage coaches from using that goalkeeper change as an opportunity to slow down the game or delay the game. Okay. So, and it used to be a tactic that coaches would use. Okay, well, hey, you know what? My first line's been playing a lot here in the 3rd period. We're down by a goal. I want to give them a little bit of a break. We'll just slow things down here a little bit with a couple of goalkeeper changes. Okay. And the spirit and the intent of this particular rule is to try to discourage that from happening. So that's why this particular rule is written the way it is, and why we have the various scenarios for when a goalkeeper is substituted for. The next one, Rule 408, is substitution of penalties. Jack, you want to cover this one?
Sure, I'll cover this one. And what you see in front of you is the verbiage in the rule book from Rule 408. They call it delayed penalties. And in the old days, we used to call it stacked penalties. And that's when you have a single team having 3 or more players actually serving penalties at the same time. And that it really becomes confusing who comes out, who's supposed to be the player that comes out, what happens to that third penalty time. And so, as you see the example here, player X on team A gets a minor penalty. Player Y gets a minor penalty 15 seconds later, and 15 seconds after that, player Z gets a minor penalty. Now, here's where a couple of different rules intersect. We know that the minimum number of players that a team can have on the ice at any one time is 4. So assuming that one of them is the goaltender, and then there's 3 skaters. So eventually, as time goes on, player X's penalty time is going to expire. Now, what can you do with player X? Because when player X's time expires, player Z's time is going to start. Player Z's time had to be delayed because we already have the minimum number of players on the ice for team A, and we just have to wait to start his penalty. So when X's penalty finishes, he has to stay in the box. We all understand that. If play stops anytime after that, player X can come out of the box. But if play continues and Y's penalty expires, X is the player that comes out. The players come out of the box in the order that their penalties expire. And that's the simplest way to put it. So when Z's penalty expires, Y is released. You always have to manage this so that team A only has on the ice the proper number of players that they're allowed to have. Now, this becomes a problem more often than not with the penalty timekeepers, the person that's watching in the penalty box, because maybe it's the dad of player Y who says his son's supposed to go out and wants to send him out. You have to make sure that you explain to the penalty timekeeper and to the scorekeeper what the procedure is for people to come out during that time. So I'll go over it real quick again. When Z goes in, you have to hold up on starting his time. Most of the clocks will do this automatically. Hold up on his time starting. His time can't start until one of the other penalties expires. When X's time expires, Z's time starts, but X cannot leave if play continues, if there's no stoppage. Once Y's penalty expires, X can come out. Once Z's penalty expires, Y can come out. And pity poor player Z. He goes in at 4:30. His penalty time really doesn't start running until 3 minutes. And then he may not be able to come out until a stoppage well after his penalty time has run out. I'll bring up one other scenario with this. In many areas, the penalty bench is right next door to the players' benches. Players must leave the penalty bench by way of the ice. If there's a door between there and the team bench, they can't just go through there. They got to come out through the ice. And that's where you get the too many men on the ice penalty if they come out. Also, if the wrong person is put out and there's a goal scored, now you have a problem because you have the wrong player on the ice. So you have to make sure that everybody pays attention to this, make sure the proper people come out. It really is relatively simple. It's just hard to explain. Easy to do, hard to explain.
Well, I think it goes back, pardon me, Matt, I think it goes back to what Matt said just a little while ago, is try to keep it simple in your mind.
Mhm.
And if they take what you just said, Jack, is that, always keep in mind the number of players that a penalized team is entitled to have on the ice,
right,
along with they come out in the order in which they went in. That keeps it about as simple as you can make it.
Yep.
That's true. And
Go ahead, Jack.
And if I can take, this gets back to what we were talking a few minutes ago about rule knowledge. This is a rule that it doesn't come up too often. Maybe a couple of times a year you might have it in a game. So you have to know this rule because you're probably the only one in the building that will know it when it happens. And you have to take charge and make sure that everything works correctly for that game. So that's what I mean about knowing the rules, that you don't always have to call. You don't always have to call on. So
Yeah, no, and it's understanding the spirit of the intent of that again. And again, the
Mhm.
other thing to keep in mind, if this happens, it may only happen a couple of times a year, but if it happens, the chances of it having a significant impact on the game
Mhm.
is pretty significant. It's a pretty high chance that somewhere along the line, whether goals are going to be scored or players are going to be out on the ice when they're ineligible to be on the ice, one of those things is going to happen, and that does have an impact on the game.
And
So,
I would just add one more thing if I can. Anywhere along the way with this, when there is a stoppage, then any player whose time has expired can come out of the box. You don't have to just stay there until the end of FZ's penalty. But if time
To-
keeps running, you're gonna have to handle it this way.
To Matt's point about the importance of it, also, I hope everyone realizes that if they're not sure of how to handle this situation, you do have a partner or partners on the ice. Have a quick conversation with them to make sure you get it right.
okay, very good points. Next, Dave, I'm going to let you talk about 622 holding an opponent, and specifically the face wash versus the grabbing the face mask.
Okay, well, quickly, 622, of course, is holding an opponent. Paragraph A has to do with grabbing a hold of your opponent in some way and restricting their movement. But paragraphs B and C, or I should say paragraph A has to do with fairness as far as gaining a competitive advantage. But sections B or paragraphs B and C probably are much more based on safety than necessarily on fairness, but of course fairness comes into play no matter what. B and C are really, our concern is the safety of the players. And with paragraph B, it says a major in a game misconduct shall be assessed to a player who uses their hand to rub, grab, or hold the face mask of an opponent. Now, it's also important for new officials especially to combine their reading of the rule book along with the casebook situations, because the casebook situations tend to add a little more, or an example, some examples of exactly what's the appropriate way to apply a rule in a given situation. In B, what does it mean? What does a hand rub mean? Well, that's kind of explained in the casebook, and it's the rubbing is designed to address kind of like the face wash, where an opposing player will just put their hand on the face mask of an opponent and just push off. That in and of itself is not necessarily a major penalty, but depending on the degree of force that's used, it could be a major penalty. And then again, if a hand comes up and you see the fingers go into the face mask or grab the face mask in some way and then jerk or pull the player and control the player's head, now we're definitely talking major, and potentially, depending on the degree of force that's used, could be a match penalty for reckless endangerment. It's really, really, really important that and that's why what Jack was talking about a little while ago, and Matt, about sight lines, that we see these kind of situations very clearly so that we know exactly what the offense is that we're going to penalize. Again, face wash, a simple little push off, is not necessarily a major penalty, but could be. It also could be penalized as head contact or roughing. Again, it's really the decision of the official to decide what's the most appropriate penalty. And by that, I mean, what's the most obvious one? We always want to call the most obvious penalty that's available to us by the rule book. Again, in situation 2, and I just want to point this out because it is really, really important. The spirit and intent of this rule is to strictly penalize those actions that result in a player grabbing or holding the face mask, because again, it really can be a very serious safety concern if a player puts their fingers in that face mask and grabs them and yanks it, because you could do create a real injury situation with that. And again, the officials have got to use their good judgment, again, based on their rule knowledge and their judgment and their hockey common sense, as to what's the appropriate level of penalty to apply in that situation.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And the final one we want to cover before we get to your questions, it goes back to the poll question and 634D. Now, the old rule, and we actually updated, we did not change the spirit and the intent of this rule at all, and did not change the proper application of the rule. In fact, the casebook situation is the same, but all we tried to do is clean up the language a little bit. And the old language basically said that any player who swings their stick at another player in the course of an altercation shall be assessed a game misconduct or a match penalty along with any other penalty that is assessed. And then goes into, this is in addition to any other penalties that may be warranted under the fighting rule 615. So we added the terminology shall be assessed a minor or major plus a game misconduct or a match penalty. And the spirit and the intent of this rule always was to either assess a minor or a major. A game misconduct is attached to both of those. Okay, either if you choose that the action, and let's say he just kind of sort of points the stick at the opponent and takes a little thing, but there's no contact and no chance of contact being made, it's still an inappropriate action during an altercation, especially. Okay, so in that particular instance, it may be a minor, but we also want to acknowledge that the inappropriateness of that, especially during an altercation, and that automatically attaches to a game misconduct penalty as well. If he now actually takes a stick and swings it at him, okay, whether contact is made or not, but there was an obvious attempt to make contact, that's where the major plus the game misconduct comes in. And obviously the match penalty is more the severe action, where he clearly takes a swing at the head, swings a stick at the body real hard and makes contact. That's where the match penalty kicks in. But this rule has been like this, and the penalty options for this rule has been minor plus a game misconduct, major plus a game misconduct, or a match penalty, probably for at least the last 25 years. But it was constantly causing problems. We tried to clean that up. It is covered in the situation handbook as well. So bottom line is you want to make sure that that's clear, because that is presenting some problems on the exam still. And as evidenced by the poll question, everyone reads the actual rule a little bit differently in terms of how we might put that together. So with that in mind, we do have some really good questions here from the audience that we want to get to. I'm going to start with you, Jack. Team A is on the power play. Team B takes another penalty, but the call is delayed, so we have a delayed penalty on Team B, who's already shorthanded. Team A scores during the delayed penalty. Which penalty is terminated? The penalty being served, or the delayed penalty, or both?
Well, that's really an easy one. Since Team A is on the power play and a goal is scored, the player then serving the penalty, his penalty is terminated. The penalty that is being delayed is enforced, and that player will have to serve his full minor penalty or major penalty, or whatever it is that the delayed penalty calls for. So basically, the person, being that's a minor penalty, that is in a penalty box would be released and his penalty terminated, and the new penalty would start right then.
Okay, very good. Dave, one for you, a little bit tougher maybe. Recently, an entire 12U team arrived for a contest without the required mandatory mouth protection per Rule 304F. Is the game a forfeit or suspended, or how should the official handle that?
Well, first of all, we want to try to make sure that whenever and wherever possible, that the game that we play a scheduled game. However, it's very clear what the required equipment is, and mouthpieces are one of the required pieces of equipment that at that age level. And so, listen, it's the responsibility of the official in this particular case, when they become aware that there's a piece of required equipment, that they have to have that piece of equipment in order to participate. And quite honestly, it's amazing how these pieces of types of equipment just magically appear once the officials lay the law down and say, you need to have them before we can play this game.
I have a little funny anecdote from that we had an official here where that actually happened to. And the team actually, the entire team, I think it was probably a Pee Wee team at that point, was marched to the pro shop and they all purchased new mouthpieces for the game so the game could go forward.
And look, you know, for those of you who may not have had the experience, what's the word I'm looking for? The excuse, well, we've never had to wear them before this, doesn't fly. Because quite frankly, I'm sorry, you know, it just is not a valid reason for not having a required piece of equipment. And to Jack's point, listen, we've had national tournament games at the national tournament where there is a piece of missing either required equipment or an illegal piece of equipment. And we've said, this is unacceptable. You need to get the right piece of equipment or the player doesn't play.
Okay, I'll take the next one. Must a player's stick make contact with the puck in order to avoid a roughing penalty when checking their opponent? Or does the stick just need to stay below the knee to show an intention of playing the puck? That's a really great question. And the best way I can really answer that for you is that no, the stick does not need to make contact with the puck. And keep in mind, the beauty of hockey is that the player who has possession of the puck or control of the puck at that time, he's doing everything he can to protect the puck and keep it away from the opponent. So sometimes that player is just going to be better at being able to do that than the player who's pursuing the puck along those lines. But if we think about what the spirit and the intent, there's two reasons as to why we incorporated the language that we did into the roughing rule as it relates to body checking. First and foremost, by requiring the stick or encouraging the stick to be below the knees, we now bring the hands down. Okay, so we are no longer in a situation where the players, and we're emphasizing the fact to the players that it is not acceptable to deliver a check with the hands or the forearms or the elbow or with the arms in general. So it brings that stick down. And the focus on playing that puck then is another reason to have that stick down, so to speak. The second thing is the opponent has to have possession of the puck or control of the puck. And as long as the opponent has control, we now have the valid excuse of that player who is about to deliver the check has the opportunity to attempt to gain control of the puck. Okay. And in doing so has that stick down. So we avoid the situation and we make it perfectly clear that it is not acceptable to body check an opponent who does not have control of the puck. Because if our focus is on gaining possession of the puck or gaining control of the puck, if the opponent doesn't have the puck, there is really no reason for us to be body checking them. So again, neither one of those two concepts were new to the rules, so to speak, or change the spirit and the intent of the rule. But what it did do is it placed a greater emphasis on those two areas, which is the opponent has control of the puck. So therefore, in order to body check, we're making an effort to play the puck, but we do not have to make stick contact with the puck in order to make that a legal body check. If the stick is below the knees, the arms are down, the opponent has the puck, and it's the trunk of the body, the shoulder or the hips, to the shoulder or the hips to the opponent, we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're making an effort, an honest effort to gain possession of the puck, and therefore it should be a legal body check. Okay. Jack, when a player is assessed a minor and a misconduct, can a player from the bench serve the minor, or must it be a player who was on the ice at the time of the penalty call?
Well, in this case, since it is a player, not a goalkeeper, then any person on the bench or on the ice can serve the minor portion of the penalty. except for the backup goaltender. If it was a goaltender that caused the penalty, then somebody from the ice would have to come on to serve the minor plus the misconduct for the goaltender. And then the substitute player, again, could just be somebody from the bench.
Okay, very good. Dave, can you give an example of Rule 639A when you would not call a trip? Does it matter how the stick was used if it trips the opponent?
It absolutely does make a difference. And that's, again, we go back to what we were talking about earlier with regards to judgment and hockey common sense. I mean, if an opponent is trying to gain possession of the puck and through that effort in some way trips the opponent and he gains possession of the puck. But again, you've got to use your judgment with regards to, was that the intent of that action, is to gain possession of the puck, and the player tripping is just an aside to that action. That would not necessarily be a tripping penalty. However, if the player simply wants to gain possession of the puck by tripping by putting his stick by the player's skates or doing something else, hooking him or whatever and taking him down, that's a penalty. So yeah, there are those situations where it would not necessarily be a tripping penalty, but again, you have to see the whole scenario to determine what was the intent of the attacking or of the opposing player and what was the end result of that action.
Okay, very good. I'll take the next one. Does an extension of the arms during a body check always demand a roughing penalty? I would say yes. And the reason I would say that is that, once again, provided that the arms or the extension of the arms is what is initiating the contact with the opponent, then that body check is not done with the shoulders or with the trunk of the body to the trunk of the body. It is done with the arms. Now, there may be situations where a player who has a stick down and in the process of making an attempt to play the puck and delivering a body check, the natural reaction after that check is to have the arms extend out a little bit, but that wasn't what initiated that contact. So if the arms and the hands are used and extended for the purpose of delivering and initiating the contact with the opponent, yes, that falls under the roughing rule, and that should be a penalty for roughing.
Matt, can I ask a kind of a follow-up to that similar situation?
Yes.
Because we're talking about youth hockey, when there's a noticeable physical size difference between opposing players, what's the guidance with regards to the position of the arms and the hands when there's body contact?
As long as they are basically tight against the body and they're not extended, then that should be a legal check. Now, if that shoulder in that case makes direct contact to the head of the smaller opponent, we still have the head contact penalty option and should be head contact in that particular situation. But as long as the stick's down and the hands are down and they're tight with the body and the shoulders making shoulder to shoulder contact or shoulder to body or hip to body contact, then the size really doesn't matter. It only comes into play if the arms are extended and or if there is direct contact with the trunk of the body to the head of the opponent, because the player delivering the check always has to be accountable and responsible for delivering that check in a legal manner. Jack, another one for you. Rule 616, fouled from behind. It states a penalty shot, optional minor penalty shall be awarded. How do you decide?
Well, this is really an easy one because you don't decide. It really is up to the team that would get the advantage as to whether they want to accept the penalty shot or if they wanted the other team to serve a minor penalty. In my experience, not many of them give up the chance for a penalty shot. But you do have to go to the benches and check or go to the captain of the team, of the non-offending team, and ask what they want to do in that situation. So you don't have to have a coin in your pocket to flip when this situation comes up.
Yep. And I'm sure someone's out there thinking, well, why would anyone take a minor penalty, the optional minor, over a penalty shot? The reason that rule is there may be a situation late in the game, you're up by a goal, or you're up by 2 goals, and you're on the power play, and now you get that penalty shot, and you have a chance to put that team down 2 players for the remainder of the game. Okay, that 5-on-3 and being able to play keep away with that lead might be more advantageous than basically taking the penalty shot, not scoring, and then still only having the 5-on-4. So that's the scenario where that might come into play, and where a coach might think it actually is a smart thing to take the optional minor. Dave, under Rule 612C, our good friend Mr. Cutler from the greater Buffalo area. If an attacking player takes a legitimate shot towards the goal, but the puck hits the net, and then the net propels the puck out of play, where would the face-off take place?
I want to thank Mr. Cutler for that question, because I know it's been a popular one for him because of the new rule or I shouldn't say the new rule really, but the rule that we now have. The face-off would remain inside at one of the end zone face-off spots.
Okay, thank you, Dave. As long as that was a legitimate shot on goal and it
Right.
deflects off of something before it goes out of play. Okay, 2 quick ones, real quick. Again, stick need to be below the knees when delivering a hip check along the boards. Yes. Okay, when a player is angling a player in a competitive contact scenario or delivering a body check, the effort must still be there to gain possession of the puck or control of the puck. So therefore, the stick should be below the knees. And then finally, going back to our penalty scenario in under Rule 408, the delayed penalty. In this scenario, player Y comes on the ice before player X, and a goal is scored before it is noticed. What is the correct ruling? I think the key to this one right here is, as long as that particular team was entitled to have another player out on the ice, the fact that they sent Y out instead of X, okay, is not going to have an impact on whether that goal being scored. Okay, because they were still entitled to have an additional player and be 5-on-4 on the ice at that particular time. So that would not be considered. That's a more of a timekeeper error, a clerical type thing that did not have a impact in terms of on ice strength. So we're not going to be taking away a goal in that particular situation. Okay, we are running up against the hour. We had some great questions and everything. Let me real quickly share my screen one last time to do the obligatory shill for the upcoming presentations or the upcoming Zoomcast that Scott and BJ demand that I do after at the end of each one of these. Obviously tonight, December 7th, plain rules and Q&A came up. Coming up in 2 weeks on December 21st, the topic will be teamwork. And I think BJ is covering that one. And then we'll take a break for the holidays. We wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy New Year. Be back on Tuesday, January 4th with Officiating Hockey IQ. And then again, back on Tuesday, January 18th, right after the USA Hockey Winter Meeting. We'll have a quick USA Hockey program update. Don't forget to follow us on social media, the YouTube channel where video clips are present and you can look at any time, and also the previous 48 Zoomcasts are available on demand at your leisure. And then follow us also on Twitter at USA Hockey Officiating, Instagram, and all of the other social media outlets, so to speak. And finally, as is common with the Zoomcast, BJ should be sending out a survey sometime shortly, a follow-up survey. So please take a minute or two to provide the feedback so we can continue to put together a favorable topic list and put together a good program for you, and especially those that are most dedicated and joining us every week. So with that in mind, I want to thank the participants for joining us tonight. There's some very good questions and very good dialogue in terms of coming along, and very much appreciate the fact that you're with us. Take time out of your busy Tuesday night schedule to get us. I think I also want to thank Dave and Jack real quickly for taking time out of their busy schedules and also being a tremendous resource for us in regards to the rules throughout the course of the season, for not only the officials in their area, but as someone to bounce some things off of when that odd question does come up. So very much appreciate that as well. And we thank everyone's continued dedication to USA Hockey. We wish everyone a successful remainder of the 2021 calendar year. Some happy holidays, and look forward to seeing you at the next Zoomcast in the next couple of weeks. So thank you, everyone. Signing off, and have a enjoyable rest of the evening.